Hello and welcome to Ag PhD. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. Well, today on the show, we're going to continue our discussions about soil testing. One of the most important things you need to look at on your soil test is organic matter. We're going to talk about why that's important and also how you can build organic matter levels on your farm.
Well, that'd be great, Brian, but the first thing you need to do is fix compaction problems. If you have compaction in your field, if you've created it somehow this year where you were too wet or you just didn't do things the way you want to do it normally, and now you've got a compaction problem, we'll talk about solving that, fixing it for good on your farm.
We have an iron talk coming up later in the show, as well as our Weed of the Week. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics. Our Farm Basics time each week is designed to talk to non-farmers especially, but whether you're a farmer or non-farmer, there's something you've got to know about grass production. We want to think about pastures and grass production kind of like we do with our crops. We want to raise the most yield, okay? Well, with grass, it's tonnage. How are we going to improve tonnage, especially once it starts to get cold in the fall? There is absolutely something that can be done.
Well, in our part of the world, if we could just have May and June all throughout the year, we'd never have to talk about this. We've got great grass growth. I mean, you see it at home. Your lawn, you're mowing it twice a week. You're like, man, this thing just keeps growing.
That's exactly where I'm going to disagree with Darren, because what happens some days in May, Darren? Some days it gets really cold. It gets 45 degrees, 40 degrees, something like that, maybe 55, 60 for a high. That's a problem when it comes to grass production. So yes, we automatically think about mowing the lawn and everything else, but the problem is, when it's that cold, the grass doesn't grow like it should. Naturally, inside the plant, it has plant growth hormones. There's one in particular called gibberellic acid that we want to discuss today.
Well, gibberellic acid helps with stem elongation. And so when plants are growing fast and you're mowing the yard twice a week, or you could say, I had the cattle out on the pasture, they can hardly keep up. The grass is growing so fast. That's awesome. Your plant is producing a lot of gibberellic acid in the roots, pushing it up. Now it's getting all the stem elongation. So how do we keep that up all through the season?
Yeah, but the thing is, this is naturally produced in the plant when there's heat. Okay, when there's no heat, now we've got a problem. So what we suggest you do if you have pastures, or for that matter, if you want to mow your lawn a little bit more, you can use gibberellic acid right over the top of that grass when that temperature is in the range of 40 to 65 degrees, especially 50 to 65 degrees is usually what we target. But the point is, when you have a little bit cooler conditions, you can put that gibberellic acid on, you trick the plant into thinking things are good, you will absolutely have a lot more stem elongation, you will absolutely have more tonnage when you're spraying timely.
Well, it's very inexpensive to do, and you will get a lot more growth, there's no doubt about it. We've seen it at home on our own pasture. Wow, it makes a big difference. It's very noticeable pretty quickly, actually, too. And the thing that you may think of is, well, I'm doing rotational grazing and I'm putting my cattle into different parts of the pasture, so I give that grass time to regrow. You can speed that up. So you don't have to move them quite as often if you're using Rhiza.
Okay, so real quick, we would just challenge you. If you are a rancher and you want more grass production, try some gibberellic acid this fall. When that temperature is below 65 degrees, yes, it's got to be above freezing, obviously, but below 65 degrees, try some gibberellic acid side by side with untreated. You will see a difference. This is something that you absolutely will want to do moving forward because it's very inexpensive. One product we've used that has gibberellic acid in it is Rise Up Smart Grass, but there are others out there as well.
Well, there are a lot of things to focus on out in your pasture. One of those things may just be controlling our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
This agro-liquid line is something special. A lot of really impressive playmakers. Take a look at Sure K. This guy is an enigma.
But Wrap your head around the exceptionally high plant response when compared to conventional potassium sources, the research-proven plant availability, plus flexible application options and mixing capabilities.
Really stellar performance stats. Sure K is a true standout, and that's a winning goal on any field.
Leading the charge in strip tillage for more than a decade, the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm today.
Avoid the V-shaped pattern of injury caused by chemical buildup in your booms. The Express End Cap from Hypro eliminates the dead ends that lead to herbicide buildup and provides easy access to your booms, giving a complete flush between applications. Hypro, helping you spray better.
Morton is eager to make the building you've always dreamed of a reality. Visit us online at mortonbuildings.com.
At Estes Performance Concaves, we know how valuable your time is at harvest. That's why we designed the new XPR concave system. The XPR system is the #1 performance concave system on the market, surpassing the rest in both speed and efficiency, ensuring every last grain from your field gets into your tank. Plus, XPR concaves work for all row crops. No more changing concaves, meaning you have less downtime. Take back your bushels this harvest. Get Estes Performance Concaves in your combine today.
Organic matter is one of the most important things you can take a look at on your soil test. There are many reasons why organic matter is important. One that I'll talk about to start with is something you may not think about all the time, and that is organic matter mineralizes. It releases nutrients for future crops. Each year on our farm, I take a look at, hey, how much organic matter do I have and how much nitrogen am I going to get out of that? 20 to 30 pounds per percent of organic matter. So if I have 5% organic matter, that's 100 to 150 pounds of free nitrogen. I'm also going to get roughly 4 to 7 pounds of phosphorus out for every 1% of organic matter, and 2 to 3 pounds of sulfur.
All right, Brian, that's great. Looking at the dollars and cents, it doesn't surprise me. That's typically where Brian likes to go. But I want to start here. When you think about organic matter, a lot of times I've got a cornfield behind me here, and farmers will say, okay, I cut my corn, I've got all this residue on top of the ground, I have all this organic material, that's going to help me build my soil. And you're kind of right in that a cornfield can really have potential to help you build organic matter up in your soil, but it's not so much from the above ground residue. The thing you have to remember with corn plants and most plants out there, they're going to have about as much plant material below the ground as they do above the ground. All that material below the ground, if you leave it undisturbed, it's going to break down naturally, and a lot of that root system, as it decays, is going to become organic matter. The organic material on top of the ground, sure, some of that could potentially become organic matter. It can get pulled down in the soil with earthworms and other ways. And yeah, maybe 1% of that above ground stuff is going to become organic matter. It's still important, but when we talk about building up organic matter in our soil, a lot of times we're dealing with below ground residue.
So again, organic matter is decayed plant or animal residue. That's really what it is. And that organic matter, that's what you're going to read. That's the number that we're looking for on that soil test. Now, when we talk about benefits, so I already mentioned that, hey, this is great when I can get some nutrients out of that over time. And let me just put this in very simple terms. I find that if I have lots of organic matter out there, my ground is almost squishy. It's almost like a sponge. Okay, that's great because now I can get more water infiltration. I have more oxygen moving in that soil. I have more soil life out there. Those are all really big benefits to organic matter.
Brian talked about water a little bit, and let's talk about the water holding capacity of soil. Now, there can certainly be differences in soil, clay versus sand, and different cation exchange capacities and so forth. But the part that organic matter plays in this is really big. As you build organic matter levels in your soil, each 1% increase in organic matter means you can hold 4% more water. And when you think about it, That's a huge deal. If you can build 5% more organic matter in your soil, theoretically you could hold 20% more water, which would be a big, big deal for crop production.
Darren mentioned if the organic matter increases, you have more water holding capacity. When the organic matter increases, you have more nutrient holding capacity too. So you can see that, hey, having organic matter, that's a really good thing. How am I going to build that? One of the biggest misconceptions out there is a lot of people think they can do tillage and build organic matter, but that's not correct. If you're doing lots of tillage, what you're doing is you're introducing more oxygen into that ground. And as I've had it explained to me by soil scientists, they say it's kind of like adding fuel to the fire. You burn up the organic matter much faster. So you will actually, in many cases, burn it faster than you're building it. And tillage is the #1 reason why in the last 100 years in the United States, you've seen organic matter levels continue to decrease. So the first step, if you want more organic matter, is you want to reduce tillage. We would also strongly encourage you to plant crops with lots of roots. Corn has 5 times the root mass of soybeans roughly. Okay, so corn would be a better choice than soybeans in terms of total amount of roots. Use manure or compost, use some cover crops, use biologicals. Those are the 5 things that we typically are talking about when we want to look at building organic matter.
You know, this doesn't happen overnight. It's not that you're going to go from 1% organic matter to 4% overnight. And in certain climates, it's going to be more difficult to build up organic matter because you may have a longer or shorter growing season, because you may have sand rather than heavier soil, that kind of thing. It can be a challenge building organic matter. It's something on our farm that we've set really our whole farming career. This is one of the objectives that we're going to have, is building organic matter over time. We've been able to do that in the last 20 or 30 years. We've grown our organic matter levels significantly. We've seen this in our state with really a change in tillage operations where more farmers have gone to no-till or reduced tillage operations. We've seen in general in our whole state the organic matter levels going up. So don't believe, well, you're never going to make a difference and it's going to take forever to do this. You can do it in your lifetime, no doubt.
One of the things we would encourage you to do is go right to your fence line or some other area that's never been tilled on your farm. Do a soil test there, find out the organic matter level, and that tells you at least what you should be at, and you can build it even beyond that level.
Well, building organic matter levels in soil is generally a pretty good thing. Another thing that farmers would agree is a great thing is controlling our weed of the week. We'll show you how to do it later in the show.
Your planter is the single most important piece of equipment on your farm, because without a uniform stand, you can't reach maximum yield. That's why Harvest International set out to design a planter that takes advantage of the newest innovations in planter technology. Built tough for high speed and integrated with the latest precision enhancements, Harvest International planters ensure every seed you plant today puts more in your bin at harvest. Harvest International, planting the future.
Out here, great yield starts with great weed control. That's why I choose the Roundup Ready Extend crop system, the system that makes the difference, because only I know what it takes out here. Yield's what it's all for, but keeping my fields clean all season, that's what it's all about. This is my field.
Farmers across the country have put their confidence in the Roundup Ready Extend crop system. These are their experiences.
I'm excited about using XtendoMax to clean up some of our fields.
We've had pressure from our neighbors with the water hemp, and the XtendoMax has just cleaned it up.
The XtendoMax is going to get the pigweeds and any other weeds that are out there.
I am extremely satisfied with this product.
It seems to work pretty dang good.
Take a look inside any rotary combine, and you'll find single rotor technology. Technology Case IH introduced over 35 years ago with the axial flow combine. But unless it gives you more bells and whistles with fewer belts and chains, more power using less fuel, it's not an axial flow. Because while the heart of every rotary combine beats red, only Case IH gives you the power to do more.
If you're looking to expand your farm's grain handling, you want everything to be fast and efficient. The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. That's fast enough to fill a semi in 6 minutes. Plus, our hood is designed to gently direct the flow of grain straight down, keeping your crop in condition. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
When I'm talking to farmers about compaction, I love some of the words that get used. For example, I'm going to eliminate compaction issues. You're never going to eliminate compaction issues. This is something you're constantly going to fight your entire farming career, and you can't ever eliminate it. You can minimize the effects of compaction, and that's really what we want to talk about today.
Well, ideally, you would stay out of the field until the soil is absolutely perfectly fit in every square foot of the field. Realistically, that almost never happens. There's going to be one little spot in the field that's a little bit too wet or whatnot. And man, it's right down towards the end, and we've got to get stuff planted or we're not going to have it ready to go before frost comes. So farmers are constantly dealing with this. Or, you know, we got a little sprinkle of rain last night. It may not be perfectly fit right away, but in a few hours it's going to be good.
Yeah, but hold up, Darren, hold up. You're talking just about rain and making it seem like, oh, if I don't have wet soil, I'm not going to have compaction. Guess what? Even on dry soil, you're going to have compaction with today's equipment, even with the equipment of yesteryear. What did we have when we had some of the small tractors? We also had very small tires. So when you start looking at the pounds per square inch, that's what a lot of people start talking about today. And that's one of the reasons people have gone to tracks. That's one of the reasons people go to bigger tires, lower pressure. Yes, you can certainly do those things, but again, we're never going to get rid of compaction. We're just simply trying to reduce it, because the more compaction you have, the more problem your roots are going to have to grow, and that's really what this whole discussion comes back to.
All right, let's talk about detecting compaction then. All right, you say we've got compaction. How do we find it out in the field? Well, there's a couple different things you may look at. One thing may be a penetrometer. Now, you may not own a penetrometer, but typically you're going to see an agronomy firm near you will have a penetrometer or a soils consultant, this kind of thing. They bring this tool out, they press it down into the soil, and they see as they go down through the soil what the level of resistance is. That would be one way. You could use a penetrometer. The penetrometer results are going to vary a little bit depending on soil moisture. If you have a lot of moisture in the soil, it'll push down easy. If you're bone dry and have been for 2 years, you're probably not even going to get the penetrometer in the ground. But if you've got average moisture conditions, you can get a pretty good reading. The other thing would be if you do some digging. Now, you could do some digging with a backhoe or a skid loader or something and dig a root pit, for example. Or you could just use a post hole digger. And if you use a post hole digger, it only takes a minute. You dig that post hole. You could reach your arm down in the hole and push a knife into the side. Typically, you want a blade that's at least 4 inches long, maybe a little longer. If you have a 1-inch blade, you're not really going to feel much resistance coming back up. But if you've got a long blade that you stick into the side of that soil and then you pull it up slowly as you go, you're going to find there's normally at least a couple different layers of resistance in your soil. We call those compaction layers.
All right, with the compaction layers, the first thing that we got to think about is how'd they get there in the first place? Most likely, the top one got there because of tillage. So when you're doing tillage, we just encourage you, try to vary the depth. Try to find wherever your compaction is at and get just below that and continue moving that around from year to year. If you've got deep compaction layers, those might be natural. We've used a Brilliant Zone Commander, for example. We've called it zone building and gone out with these straight shanks, narrow points, not to bust everything up. We're not huge believers in C shanks and wide points and turning the soil. Usually that doesn't work out the best because all we do is move the compaction down a little bit. What we like to do is kind of slice through those deeper levels of compaction. But the big thing that I want you to think about today is, okay, you're going to have compaction no matter what, anytime you're going over that field. How can we make our soil a little more tolerant to that? Well, one of the biggest things, Darren has been mentioning moisture already a couple of times. Okay, well, think about the moisture. If we can keep the water table down, we're in better shape. So we find that tiled fields have far less compaction. We also find that fields that have lots of calcium have less compaction. Calcium is a much bigger molecule than magnesium. We want good calcium levels, at least 65 to 80% calcium in the soil. And then finally, more organic matter means a spongier soil and less chance for compaction.
One key point that Brian made early on there was you've got to get just below that compaction layer if you're out there doing tillage. And we see this all the time. So every time I go in a field, I like to bring a tile spade with me and I just poke it around in the field as we're walking, looking to see if I find compaction. If you do get into that compacted layer and you're actually doing some good out there, it's going to take more horsepower to get that job done. It's going to be a little harder to go fast out in your field, but you have to keep in mind, it's not about speed, it's about getting the right job done. In this case, eliminating that compaction layer and managing it on your farm so you can get the best root growth and ultimately the best yields.
The other thing that I want you to think about is the first pass over the field always makes the most compaction. So they say that roughly 70% of all compaction, if you go over it 50 times, 70% of the compaction is going to happen the first time over. I don't know if I agree with that necessarily, but the point is if you can manage your traffic patterns out in the field, then you have fewer spots where you have real compaction issues. So again, compaction is tremendously important. We just encourage you, look hard at your soil, work on your drainage, improve your calcium and organic matter levels, and do everything you can to stay off that ground when it's wet.
Well, one reason you may need to be out in the field is to control our weed of the week. We'll show you how to stop this tough weed coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Corteva Agriscience, Agriculture Division of Dow DuPont. Finish the fight against tough weeds with the Enlist Weed Control System.
Weeds are tough, but we're tougher. With unrivaled weed control, reduced drift, and near zero volatility. So, who's tough now?
Our weed of the week is Absinth Wormwood.
Well, it might be a little tough to say, but here's the thing. This is a perennial weed. It's a shrub. And you know what? When we start talking perennial, that's tough. When it's a shrub, we don't have a lot of options there.
Normally we see this one in the north. So the northern 3/4 of the United States and all the way through Canada, this can be a tough one.
Yeah, and I think that's a little strange because it's in the sage family, and usually the sage we see a little bit further south. But anyway, how are we going to control this? Typically we find it out in pastures. It's not that difficult. Just use some Tordon. Actually, even 2,4-D, dicamba, distinct, those types of products are not bad on it, but personally I still like Tordon for long-term control.
Product selection is really big because a lot of times we think about shrubs or woody type species and we're talking about chaparral or we've got milestone in a lot of the mixes trying to control thistles. Those aren't the best choices for this product or for this particular weed. In fact, they're maybe 50% control. You can get nearly 100% control with a 2,4-D application or a Tordon like you mentioned.
So when we talk about this being a perennial weed and using 2,4-D, are we going to kill it, roots and all? No way. You've got to have some Tordon in there to get down into the root system and get you long-term control. But at least in the short term, yes, you can burn down that top growth with 2,4-D, dicamba, distinct.
Fortunately, Absinth Wormwood is not a weed that we see in cultivated fields, so it's not something we're trying to control in wheat, in soybeans, and corn. Like many of the weeds that we have in pastures, grasslands, ditches, these kinds of places, that's where we see Absinth Wormwood.
That's all the time we have for this week's weed, Absinth Wormwood, but stay tuned, Iron Talk is coming up next.
The buzz on this line is probably the best in 10 years, both in soil and in the plant. Joe, you've been doing this for a while. What's your take?
Well, Don, you take a player like High Energy N, 3 forms of nitrogen, plus sulfur and iron with slow release technology, he's making plays all season long.
Oh, look at his numbers. He's getting it done.
But don't forget about N Response. This guy's designed for a quick release nitrogen.
It's looking like another championship season for Agro Liquid.
No 2 seasons are the same. Each brings its own set of challenges, and you've seen a few. So many threats, and not one single thing can be taken for granted. In the fight against the unpredictable, the Acceleron portfolio provides coverage on 4 fronts: fungicides, insecticides, nematicides, and bioenhancers. Rise stronger with one simple decision.
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
Your planter is the single most important piece of equipment on your farm, because without a uniform stand, you can't reach maximum yield. That's why Harvest International set out to design a planter that takes advantage of the newest innovations in planter technology. Built tough for high speed and integrated with the latest precision enhancements, Harvest International planters ensure every seed you plant today puts more in your bin at harvest. Harvest International, planting the future.
Are you looking to make a career in an ag-related field? The Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation is pleased to offer a $2,500 scholarship for students enrolled in an agricultural program for the 2018-2019 school year. The goal with this scholarship is to further the education of students who understand the importance of proper stewardship and responsible nutrient management for agriculture and society as a whole. To learn more and apply, visit rnmf.org/scholarship before October 15th.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
Take a look inside any rotary combine, and you'll find single rotor technology. Technology Case IH introduced over 35 years ago with the axial flow combine. But unless it gives you more bells and whistles with fewer belts and chains, more power using less fuel, it's not an axial flow. Because while the heart of every rotary combine beats red, only Case IH gives you the power to do more.
Get a rainy day during harvest, this could be the perfect time to check the health of your engine coolant. I know it's not that cold yet, but you're super busy and it'll creep up on you before you know it. I'll give you the steps to take and a few things to think about in today's Iron Talk. The first thing you need to do is visually inspect the coolant color and coolant level in the overflow tank. If everything's fine, you may just need to top off the coolant as needed. Check the freeze point with a refractometer and adjust as needed. Also, pH strips are a handy way to test your coolant condition at any point during the year. If you need to change the coolant out, here's the best way to do it. First, drain the coolant and inspect all hoses and fittings. Then, flush with clean, preferably distilled water. Run your engine for about 15 minutes so the clean water can flush through the system. Then, drain it again and properly dispose. Now you're ready to refill the cooling system with coolant. Run the engine once more to circulate the new coolant. 15 minutes should get the job done. Then, once the engine cools down, you can use the refractometer and check and adjust the coolant system's freeze point. One piece of advice my dad gave me when I was young still sticks with me today. I'd see him in the shop spending time going through everything on his equipment. When I'd ask Dad why he was so fussy about it, he'd say this: "There's a reason why pieces of equipment and some operators have very few breakdowns or lost time. Proper maintenance is a must." And that's why I'd advise you to do some simple maintenance and upkeep items right now before the weather gets too cold and before they're forgotten. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Well, that's our time for today, but before we go, we want to invite you to check out the Ag PhD Insider magazine. You can go to agphdinsider.com to learn more.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.